In the vast sands of the ancient Middle East, a child was born who would shape nations, yet remain overlooked for centuries. His name was Ishmael, firstborn son of Abraham. While most Bible readers know about Isaac, the child of promise, few pause to understand Ishmael's journey, a story marked by destiny, rejection, and divine purpose. In this video, we uncover the real story of Ishmael, who he was, what happened to him, and why his legacy still echoes today. For 13 years, Ishmael was Abraham's only son, the one he taught, laughed with, and dreamed for. Abraham pleaded, "If only Ishmael might live under your blessing." But God had a different plan. He said, "Your wife Sarah will bear you a son, and you will call him Isaac. Sarah, now a mother at nearly 90, became fiercely protective of her son. "Do not be so distressed about the boy and your maidservant," God said. When all hope seemed lost, Hagar placed her son under a bush and walked away, unable to watch him die. The Bible says he settled in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother found him a wife from Egypt. When Abraham died, both Isaac and Ishmael came together to bury their father. This quiet moment of reconciliation is often missed, but speaks volumes. Despite their separation, despite everything, Ishmael honored his father. Genesis also tells us Ishmael lived 137 years and had 12 sons, just as God had promised. These sons became tribal leaders, forming the foundation of many Arab peoples. He was not cast aside by accident. He was part of a divine plan, one that included hardship, yes, but also great destiny. His life teaches us that rejection by people does not mean rejection by God. Ishmael's name is a powerful reminder that God hears the forgotten. He listens to the ones pushed aside. Even in the desert, even without the covenant, Ishmael was never alone. That is why his story still resonates with so many who feel like outsiders, those who live in the shadows of someone else's promise. Ishmael's legacy did not fade, expanded, fulfilling God's word to the letter. In a world that idolizes the spotlight, his life points to a deeper truth, that significance is not always tied to visibility. God's promise to Ishmael didn't need a stage. It needed faith, survival, and resilience. His story challenges our assumptions about who gets to be called chosen, and it reminds us that divine blessing can take many forms, not just the ones we expect. Though he was no longer with Abraham, Ishmael was growing into the man God had said he would be: strong, independent, and destined to father a great people. His story is not just an ancient narrative, it's living history. For millions of people across the Middle East and beyond, Ishmael is a patriarch, a prophet, a spiritual ancestor. His journey from rejection to restoration is a symbol of hope and strength. And for every person who's ever felt forgotten or overlooked, Ishmael's life offers a bold message. God sees you. God hears you. And your story is not over. He lived outside the covenant, yes, but never outside God's hearing. And that theme, God hears, echoes every time we say his name, Ishmael. These were not just isolated tribes. They became a powerful presence in the ancient world. The Bible's prophecy had come to life. Ishmael had indeed become a great nation. While Isaac's lineage gave rise to the Israelites, Ishmael's sons populated much of the Arab world. For generations, the destinies of these two brothers would run in parallel, sometimes in conflict, sometimes in peace, but forever intertwined. In one of the Bible's most emotional scenes, she sat nearby and sobbed. In Islamic tradition, Ishmael is not a forgotten son, he is a revered prophet. According to the Quran and Islamic belief, Ishmael helped Abraham build the Kaaba in Mecca and is honored as an ancestor of the Prophet Muhammad. This belief has contributed to millennia of cultural and religious connection between the children of Abraham through both Isaac and Ishmael. While Judaism and Christianity often focus on Isaac, Islam places Ishmael at the center of God's promise to Abraham, making him a figure of unity and divergence at the same time. But once again, God intervened. Genesis 21 tells us, God heard the boy crying, and an angel called out to Hagar, "Do not be afraid." God has heard the boy crying as he lies there. A well of water miraculously appeared, and Ishmael's life was saved. This was not just a rescue, it was a reaffirmation of his value and future. Listen to whatever Sarah tells you, because it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. Yet God reaffirmed, I will make the son of the maidservant into a nation also, because he is your offspring. With a heavy heart, Abraham gave Hagar and Ishmael water and bread, and sent them into the wilderness of Beersheba. During a celebration for Isaac's weaning, Sarah saw Ishmael, a teenager, mocking or playing roughly with Isaac. Whether it was jealousy, rivalry, or just youthful behavior, Sarah reacted with urgency. She demanded that Abraham send Hagar and Ishmael away, declaring, "Get rid of that slave woman and her son, for that woman's son will never share in the inheritance with my son Isaac." These words, cold and final, must have pierced Abraham's heart. But as for Ishmael, I have heard you. I will surely bless him. I will make him fruitful and will greatly increase his numbers. Ishmael was not forgotten by God. Though he would not carry the covenant, he was promised greatness. 12 rulers would come from him, and he would become a great nation. Many forget this crucial part of the story. For over a decade, Abraham believed Ishmael was the fulfillment of God's promise. He likely imagined Ishmael inheriting his legacy, carrying the covenant, and becoming the father of many nations. That is what made the arrival of Isaac and God's insistence on him as the chosen one so painful and complicated. Grab a seat, because what you're about to hear is far more than a forgotten tale. It is a spiritual mystery waiting to be explored. The story begins in Genesis 16. Abraham, then called Abram, had received a promise from God. He would become the father of many nations. But as time passed and his wife Sarai remained childless, doubt crept in. Hagar, crying in despair, encountered an angel of the Lord. This is the first time in the Bible that an angel appears by name to a woman. The angel told Hagar to return and submit to Sarai, but not without a powerful promise. You are now pregnant, and you will give birth to a son. You shall name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard of your misery. The name Ishmael means God hears. Before he was even born, Ishmael was already known by God. His life was marked by divine attention, something few realize. Desperate for an heir, Sarai made a decision that would alter history. She gave her Egyptian maidservant, Hagar, to Abraham as a concubine. This was a common cultural practice of the time, but what followed was anything but ordinary. When Hagar conceived, tensions between her and Sarai exploded. The house was divided, and Hagar, pregnant and alone, fled into the wilderness. It was there, in the desert, that something extraordinary happened. As Ishmael grew, he became a beloved son to Abraham. Then came Genesis 17. God appeared to Abraham and told him something shocking. The covenant would not go through Ishmael, but through a future son with Sarah. As Isaac was born and grew, the dynamics in Abraham's household shifted dramatically. Abraham was deeply distressed. Ishmael wasn't just another child. He was his firstborn, his own flesh and blood. But God reassured him in a difficult moment. Out in the desert, Hagar and Ishmael wandered until the water ran out. From that moment on, Ishmael lived in the desert and became an archer. Many overlook the end of Ishmael's story, but the Bible gives us closure in Genesis 25. Ishmael's descendants would go on to inhabit the regions from Havilah to Shur, stretching from northeastern Egypt across the Arabian Peninsula. The figure of Ishmael holds deep significance far beyond the Bible. But perhaps the most misunderstood part of Ishmael's story is its emotional weight. For content creators and spiritual seekers alike, Ishmael represents something vital, the overlooked purpose. Even today, the legacy of Ishmael shapes global history, culture, and faith. As we reflect on Ishmael's life, it's important to realize that his journey was not a mistake, it was a mission. His survival in the wilderness wasn't just a miracle. It was a declaration that God has purposes beyond human approval. Abraham loved Ishmael. God blessed Ishmael. The Bible doesn't say an angel heard Ishmael. It says God heard him. In a world filled with noise and hierarchy, where the powerful are usually the ones acknowledged, this moment is radical. God didn't dismiss that. He honored Abraham's request. That tells us something beautiful about the relationship between prayer and promise. Ishmael didn't grow up with the same spiritual inheritance as Isaac, but he still walked with the weight of a divine name and a prophetic destiny. He didn't need a temple or a title to be meaningful. He didn't become a patriarch by sitting on a throne. He became one through perseverance, survival, and obedience in the harshest conditions. Despite being cast out, there's no biblical record of him seeking revenge against Isaac or Abraham. Instead, we find him returning to help bury his father, a moment that speaks volumes about healing, maturity, and perhaps even forgiveness. Or are we willing to explore the deeper, messier, but equally important paths like Ishmael's? The Bible isn't afraid to show us both, and that's what makes it powerful. It tells the stories of those in the tents and those in the desert, those on the mountain and those crying under a bush. In doing so, it reflects a God who hears every voice. That's a part of the story we need today. Let others know that the God of Abraham is also the God of Ishmael. Because in a world full of noise, there's nothing more healing than being reminded that God hears. And sometimes, the forgotten son carries a message we all need to remember. When families are divided, when wounds run deep, Ishmael shows us that reconciliation, even silent, unspoken reconciliation, is possible. He wasn't celebrated in his early years, but he was remembered by God. And in a world that often rewards visibility over value, Ishmael's life turns that idea upside down. His descendants shaped civilizations, carried legacies, and formed nations that still stand today. That's not a forgotten legacy, that's a foundational one. He simply needed to live out what God had spoken over his life. That is a lesson in faith and obedience that transcends religions and speaks to anyone asking, "Do I matter?" Ishmael's story boldly answers, yes, you do. Even though Ishmael was not the child of the covenant, he was still the child of promise in another way. God's blessing extended because of Abraham's love and intercession. If you've ever prayed for someone you're worried about, remember this: God hears. A child lying helpless under a bush, forgotten by his father's household, is heard by the Creator of the universe. Ishmael's life challenges the narratives we're taught about chosen and unchosen, about favored and forgotten. His story proves that even outside the spotlight, God is still writing purpose. For every person who's been made to feel like a mistake, or a backup plan, or second-best Ishmael stands as a testimony. You are seen, you are heard, and your life holds promise. That says something profound about God's character. He hears the voiceless. He answers those without power. Ishmael's story is a living parable of divine compassion. And yet, his story reminds us that divine plans don't always follow the path of comfort or status. Sometimes, the wilderness is where destiny begins, not where it ends. That's a message people from all walks of life can relate to, especially those who've been told they don't belong. There's something incredibly powerful about how God directly responded to Ishmael's cries. And though Ishmael is often cast in contrast to Isaac, their lives aren't only stories of rivalry. They are stories of complementary covenants. While Isaac carried the line of spiritual inheritance, Ishmael's legacy was one of multiplication and strength. Both sons received promises. Both were deeply significant. It's our limited human perspective that tends to pit them against each other. God's plan was always bigger than just one lineage. It involved many nations, many peoples, and many expressions of his blessing. In fact, When Abraham pleaded with God for Ishmael's future, it showed a father's heart full of love, concern, and hope. This narrative also invites us to think deeply about identity. Ishmael's journey teaches us that divine purpose does not require public recognition. It's also worth noting that Ishmael's story wasn't marked by bitterness. And so, when we talk about the forgotten son of Abraham, we must be careful not to overlook what God never forgot. As content creators, believers, and thinkers, we need to ask ourselves, are we only telling the stories of Isaac? So if Ishmael's story moved you, share it.